Hello and welcome to episode 18 of the podcast. I'm Robert Witham and I am your host. If we're just meeting, I am just a guy who's had a lifelong love affair with the open road and road trips. And nowadays I publish videos and podcasts and magazine and books all about the traveling lifestyle. Please consider subscribing if you're not already, whether that's on YouTube or in your favorite podcast service, so you'll be notified when I publish new episodes. Before we dive into today's topics, I want to mention that I had three requests in the last week, at least three that I remember off the top of my head, about when I'm doing a van tour on this rig that I'm in. So that's going to be coming up pretty soon. We did one on Two Meander back when I first got this thing. Of course, I'm more settled in now, and there are some slight differences. I've just been waiting because I keep coming to these things. I'm like, oh, I want to get this little tweak done and that little tweak done, So, but realistically, it's like 98, 99% there. There's always little tweaks that are going to be happening. So I'll probably just go ahead and do that pretty soon, since so many of you are asking about it. So we always kick off with Nomad news. Before we do that, if you're listening to this or watching this, you want to jump over certain sections. I do Nomad news, and I do a topic for the video, which in this case is going to be about a question of, is the current economic situation going to create more nomads like the Great Recession did 2008, 2009. So we're going to start with Nomad news, then talk about that topic about more nomads potentially, and then handle some listener questions. So in the description, both on YouTube and in your podcast service, there will be some time codes if you want to jump ahead and skip certain sections. So Nomad news. All right, the pandemic closures continue even amongst talk of reopening things. I'm not linking to a specific article on this. I've been following this. I'm sure many of you have as well. And if you're seeing stuff on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and in the news and all over the place, there's still closures going on, and many nomads continue to report difficulty finding open places to camp, as well as things that affect everyone else, like trying to find toilet paper or hand sanitizer or paper towels or all kinds of things like that. I finally found some vitamin C this week. I was all excited. I've been looking for it for a month, just trying to keep my immune system boosted, and so I finally was able to find it. Buy a big bottle, but I was able to find some anyways, so that was progress. Here's my take. I mentioned this in a recent video, a live chat stream, where I talked about hiding in plain sight. I think I may do a follow-up video on this, kind of clarifying my thinking on it more. But in my opinion, the best thing we can do as nomads right now is to keep a low profile when we do find an area to park that's open, whether that's a camping or just kind of a stealth type thing. And, I had some people arguing that we shouldn't have to hide, we had our rights and all this stuff. And in my opinion, this is not about individual rights. It is about doing the right thing for yourself and for your neighbors. Because time and time again, what we're seeing is it's when there are crowds and people congregating closely is when they decide to go ahead and close things that they previously had left open. Unless we want to see these closures continuing, we need to all exercise some individual responsibility and look out for not only ourselves but our neighbors as well, and make sure that everybody continue to enjoy these places. And I think I may do another video and clarify my thinking more deeply on that, but for now I just wanted to follow up on that the closures do continue. So I think we really need to all be careful to not be doing anything that's going to elicit further scrutiny and potentially bring about further closures. Yeah, and that's it for Nomad news this week. I have not seen as many Nomad-related stories in the news that I can follow up and share with you, because all of the news is about that word I'm not going to say because then I'll get demonetized. So topic for this video: will the current economic situation create more nomads, as we saw happen during the Great Recession? So I posted a poll on YouTube and asked, what do you all think? Will this situation create more nomads like happened during the Great Recession? I'm going to be making a video soon with my opinion. That's this video here, by the way. But I thought it would be fun to see what you all think too. So when I asked three questions, or provided three options rather. Yes, this downturn will result in more people becoming nomads. 52% of you who responded agree with that. Second Option no, this downturn will not drive many people to become nomads. 25% agreed with that statement. And finally, to the contrary, the situation may force many people off the road. 23% agreed with that statement. I want to mention too, I posted this April 14th, 154 responses as of when I sat down to record this podcast today. So huge thank you to all 154 of you who took the time to vote and share your opinion, your perspective on this. And I know there were people left at was 16 comments, I think, and some people left comments did not care to vote. So I appreciate everyone who participated in this. I think this is my top poll I've done. I've done a few over the last year or so, and I think this is the top one in terms of response. So I really appreciate everyone who jumped in and shared. So I'll give you my opinion about this, and I've been thinking about this over the last week, and even at the time I posted the poll, I wasn't sure what my opinion was, and here's where I'm at right now on this. This is what I can commit to publicly. uh, I think it's too soon to say with certainty. I think a lot of that depends on how long this whole thing continues. The longer it goes on, the more people run out of money. Get behind on rent and mortgage, that kind of stuff. It depends on whether there's a recurrence. They're talking about the high likelihood that this thing sort of gets quieted down, then recurs, maybe once, maybe multiple times before we have a vaccine or enough herd immunity to keep it under control. That could play a big role because a second shutdown would just be devastating. I mean, this one's devastating. I can't even imagine doing this again before people have a chance to recover. And also the government response. Now, this isn't, when I say that, I'm not arguing that the government should or should not be doing the stimulus stuff and other programs like that. The bottom line is purely from an economic standpoint, in terms of people's individual finances. The more the government sends out stimulus or boosted unemployment benefits, that sort of stuff, the greater the likelihood people are able to maintain their rent or mortgage payments and not lose their homes during this mess. So to the extent that the government continues doing a lot of that stuff, I think it'll help prevent people from being forced out of their homes. Now, I know there's another question of how it all gets paid for down the road. Like I said, this is just purely looking at the question of will more people become nomads out of this. My best guess actually is that all three of these are going to occur. Here's what I don't know yet. I think it's a question of which category is largest. I do think all three of these are going to occur. Some people will become nomads because of this. Some will not become nomads because of this. And some who are currently nomads may decide to get off the road altogether because of this. And I want to note, too, when I say nomads, a lot of people did do that during and following the Great Recession. I want to acknowledge that I'm aware that some people who get forced out of their homes in this situation or any other big downturn may become nomads. They may, choose to become vehicle-dwelling travelers, and this probably applies to people most likely who are have the financial means to do that, meaning they have Social Security or disability or some kind of savings to support themselves. Others, unfortunately, will probably just become basically vehicle-dwelling homeless. What I mean by that as a distinction is that um, they don't want to be doing it, and they're not excited about it, and they're looking to get back into housing as soon as possible. This is just a temporary thing. They're doing whatever they have to do to survive. Okay, so why do I say yes, it may create more nomads? The Great Recession put many people out of their homes, devastated their finances and retirement funds. I always love hearing, some economist who has plenty of money talk about how the problem is they just shouldn't have taken their money out of their 401k or their retirement or whatever, and it would have recovered. That all may be true, but if you've lost your job, you don't have unemployment, or your unemployment is grossly inadequate to pay the bills with, you got to do what you got to do to survive. And so, a lot of people took a real hit and never recovered from it. And a lot of them did end up moving into vehicles for better or for worse as a result of that. There was a huge influx in nomads following the Great Recession. I think it's also likely, or probably nearly certain, that this economic crisis is going to do the same or worse in terms of pushing people out of traditional housing and into vehicles. Again, some will embrace it, and maybe they're already thinking about it anyways. Eventually, they'll embrace it, and it'll be a good deal in the long run for them. But for others, it'll be an absolute nightmare. All right, so why do I say no? This may not create more nomads. In some ways, I think there are going to be some people who are already interested in becoming nomads. They're already watching Nomad videos, following Nomad Instagram or Facebook channels, Nomad blogs and stuff. And so they've seen through the eyes of and the reporting of nomads who are experiencing this right now just how hard this situation is on people who don't have an address. It's hard on everybody, everywhere. But when you don't have a house and you're getting told to shelter in place and they're closing campgrounds and closing all kinds of places, and it gets incredibly difficult to do this as a nomad. And with all the grocery store shortages and supply shortages, that's an even bigger crisis when you're trying to get by and you just can't carry enough supplies to keep you stocked up for a month and you don't have room. In many cases, some people do, but in many cases you can't, and so that makes it really difficult. I've heard from aspiring nomads who are reconsidering just because of what they've seen in this situation. So I think there is some of that some people are going to say, yeah, never mind, I don't think so. And a third option was to the contrary, this may force people off the road. And I think there's some of that too. I think a lot of people are really freaked out right now. This situation highlights some of the vulnerability of being on the road full time without a home base. You already had issues like a personal sickness or injury, and a major vehicle breakdown, and an interruption to your income, and all kinds of things that just leave you kind of vulnerable when you're out on the road full time. You don't have that home base to go to. If you at least got a place to go back to, that's a little bit of security there. So I think this has a lot of people unnerved and recognizing just how vulnerable you can be without that home base. And so, yes, I do think some nomads are likely to stop traveling full time if they cannot purchase or rent a home base in the foreseeable future. Okay, it's time for some listener questions. Had a bunch this week, so I'll try and move through them a little bit fast so that this doesn't take forever. First question, I can't find a screen grab for this, but somebody asked about minimalist nomads traveling without a vehicle. Now, I have met a couple people over the years who were traveling on foot, walking across the country, but they also generally had a support vehicle. In the case of the ones I'm aware of, I have read about a few people over the years who are traveling around long-term or across the country or something on foot without support vehicles. I can't remember off the top of my head who they were, or I don't have the resources to share that, but I'll keep my eyes out for that in the future in case that's something that comes up. I'll try and share it somewhere. Linda Sue asked about taking the seats out of an SUV, specifically a Dodge Journey, wondering if she removes the second and third row seats in order to get more floor-to-ceiling space, would the exposed floor be safe to lie some kind of board or other surface without damaging fixtures that are normally protected under the seats? I'm not familiar with the layout in the Dodge Journey specifically, but certainly in minivans and some SUVs, people do indeed remove the seats and are able to lay down plywood or something else for flooring. You don't have to do plywood if your floor is smooth, but a lot of times what happens is you have like bumps or ridges that are rather uncomfortable to walk around on and or to kneel on or to sit on or anything. So a lot of people don't just put down a sheet of plywood on a smooth floor. Then you can put linoleum or carpet or tile or laminate or whatever you want over the top of that, or nothing. But so like in my minivan, for example, the seats were already out of it when I got it, but there were the mounts where the seats used to attach to the floor, and those were rather uncomfortable if you kneeled on them, crawling around. And there were a couple wires I think might have gone to seatbelt alarms or something, but they were able to lay within the ridges on the floor. And so I was able to just put a sheet of plywood in there, and it worked just fine. And I've seen people in other vehicles. But if you're watching this or listening to this and you're familiar with the specifics of the Dodge Journey, what the floor is like, go ahead and leave a comment. Maybe we can help Linda Sue out there. Otherwise, it really you almost end up having to just pull the seats out and see what you're working with. And that's the case a lot of times. There's so many different vehicles and the designs change over the years. So it's difficult to talk too specifically, kind of talking in general terms. And a lot of times you just kind of have to get into it and see what you're working with and kind of go from there. Alice asked about checking at the border between Utah and Colorado. What can you explain? Why? Who? Etc. In Colorado, so this is of great interest and sounds like news. I have heard that, and I have not been able to find much on a search myself. The one thing I did find was that Colorado had implemented a virtual border check where they're pinging people's cell phones with a text message and asking them to complete a questionnaire and instructing them they needed to quarantine upon entering the state. I have not been able to find much other than that, and in that case, that program, I guess, ended up being suspended because of lots of glitches. Kay in South Dakota asked, how are nomads being counted in the 10-year census? Each area wants funding and representation. I've not heard anything specifically this year about nomads, but I do know in the past in Nevada they've had census workers go around to homeless encampments and to find campers in the BLM areas and to attempt to get them counted. I don't know if they'll be doing that this year because of all the things going on. I have seen in the paper, though, locally that the government officials are asking people to cooperate with the census and to complete the surveys, whether they do that on paper or online, so that everyone is counted for purposes of income distribution from the federal government and representation, again, as Kay was saying. So referring to the recent video I put up about RV parks, the RV park tour of every RV park I could find in Pahrump and in Amarillo Valley and in Beatty here in southern Nye County. And Kay asks, how much do these places typically charge per month? My understanding is that it's running between about $250 and $600 from what I've heard. Obviously, the nicer ones are more expensive, and the older, not quite so nice ones are cheaper. There may be some that are higher or lower than those. Those are just the ones I've heard of. I did not call all of them and ask for pricing. It does, I believe, get a little cheaper during the summer months because there are far fewer people here. There's less competition or less demand for RV sites, and it also is typically cheaper in the older ones and in the ones further north because they're more rural areas. And my father, Jay Witham here, who knew there would be so many RV parks to choose from? It will be interesting to know the average prices. $500 a month is nice, but probably the last place I would choose to say. Yeah, and that $500 a month did include utilities and Wi-Fi, according to the sign. It's right on a busy state highway with a lot of traffic, so it would not appeal to me for that reason. And it would not appeal to me because it's literally a paved parking lot with utility boxes sticking up out of the pavement. Not my kind of place, but I'm sure it works for some people, but not my kind of place. And yeah, again, like I said, $250 to $600 is what I've heard, and some of the cheaper ones are indeed up outside of town, further out. Terry asked, do they rent spots if you were in a car or a minivan? I do not know about that. It would probably be more likely in some of the older or more rural ones that have less. They're not as full. There's less demand. So that might help with that. I've seen places over the years that will allow that. Usually it's easier to do that in a county park or a state park or something like that, but there may be exceptions. You just have to kind of check on a case-by-case basis, and I would assume if they're less occupancy and they'd like to get people in, they might be a little more flexible about that sort of stuff. That can be a challenge if you're in a car or a minivan or something, or an SUV, and you're trying to find a place to stay to get your 30-day rent receipt or something in Nevada. That can be a challenge. Victoria asks, how long did it take you to research and record this? Quite extensive. Yeah, and I did not go into the one preferred RV park, I believe it is. It's right off 160. That is gated. They have a guard shack and everything, so I did not attempt to get in there. I just did a drive by and showed it from the street. I spent a couple hours on one day researching, doing some preliminary research, and then I spent most of a day driving around to all of those RV parks, and that spanned, I think, 150 miles or more. So it was a bit of driving involved in that. Some time to tour all those. I think there's more than a dozen in Pahrump, and one in Amarillo Valley, and 3 in Beatty that I found. So there's quite a few. And I will note, again, I said in that video, but I will note, I did not get out of the van. I did not talk to anybody. I had no social contact with anyone while I was doing that. Jim asks, I thought all V parks and camping grounds were closed, and not a lot of social distancing going on in some of those parks. Yeah, that is true. Some of those are pretty crowded. That's RV park and campground closures is kind of state by state. A lot of, if not all, a lot of state parks and county parks and things are closed. The RV parks has been very much state by state, and some states have closed them all. And the irony of that is they in turn forced thousands of people from who were parked for long term or for a longer period of time and forced them out into the community traveling again rather than leaving them sit still. I did see one in Pahrump that specifically had a sign that they were not accepting travelers right now. That was the Escapees Co-op in Pahrump. I did not see any other signs during my travels, so again, it's possible that some will not accept travelers right now. You just have to check with them individually and see, and that's going to change week to week what they're accepting and not accepting. And Mike writes, didn't you have a minivan for a time? Any problems with the ground clearance? This comment was on Facebook. I'd posted a little preview of videos coming up this week, Wednesday the 22nd, on overlanding in a conversion van. And Mike, yes, I did have a minivan. I think it was a 2003 Chrysler Town & Country. Had that for about a year. Worked very well for me. And I took that a whole lot of places that most people would not think a minivan could go, including Hurrah Pass, to the top of Hurrah Pass in Moab. That's at least the latter part of that is officially designated a 4x4 route. And it was bad. I mean, it was, you're going up over ledges and through loose gravel and sand and really steep climbs and some pretty bad rocks, and it just took my time, and I've done a number of roads like that with that minivan. I just take my time, and if I don't think I can make it, I back out or turn around. I'm not interested in breaking something or getting stuck, so I'm kind of cautious that way, but I am willing to have an adventure and take a certain amount of risk, but I try to moderate that and not be ridiculous either. So yeah, I did do that. The outside of that minivan was totally stock, except for it had some better tires on it that you would normally have on a minivan. They weren't like mud tires or anything like that, but they were, more aggressive tread that you might normally run on a minivan. So that worked really well for me. And the ground clearance is really what it comes down to with a minivan. They usually have decent traction, so you put some good tires on, you get further with that. So it usually does come down to the ground clearance. And I mean, that ground clearance in the Town & Country was better than like in the Camry or the Echo, Toyota Camry or Toyota Echo I used to have, but not as good as like in this van, obviously. This one's a full size and it has a 2-inch lift in the back, so it really gives you a little more room to get over stuff. So you just have to kind of pick your route and navigate and try not to get high centered or to hit on something or to get stuck. It's a little bit of a you'll have some limitations on the minivan, but you still can do an awful lot and get to an awful lot of places. That's it for listener questions. So go ahead and hit me up with your question either on YouTube in the comments or on social media, and I'll try and grab those questions for next week. Thanks for joining me in this video, everyone. Again, please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. Consider subscribing if you're not already, and we will catch you next week.